It is 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started so we can give you as much time as possible to disciple with each other this morning. It's amazing how fast time goes once you actually get into it, so let's jump right on it, and we will get you as much time as possible. Let's just go over a couple of verses and a couple of thoughts on the biblical theology of discipling this morning. And you remember last week we looked at 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 6, and we parked on that word imitators. Remember that comes from the Greek word mimetos. We get our English word mimic of it. And so as you're discipling one another, as you're connected to somebody's life, you should always, Lord willing, have somebody in your church that you are following that can be an example to you that you can imitate. So the Thessalonians were imitators of Paul and Timothy and Silvanus and others in the ministry team. You want to be growing yourself personally, and it is very helpful to have another mature believer attached to you to help you do that. And I think it's a very biblical thing. You study texts like Titus out, where you've got the older men teaching the younger men and the older women teaching the younger women. Like, this was a normal, consistent pattern of early New Testament churches where more mature saints were leading less mature saints. And they were not only teaching the word, but they were also being someone for them to imitate. So you need to be an imitator of someone so that you can be growing in Christ-likeness. So find that one in your church. And then secondly, on the heels of that, verse 7, we're going to focus on that word example this morning. So he goes on, he says, not only did they become imitators of us and of the Lord Jesus Christ, they also then in time became examples, so that you became an example to all the believers in Macedonia and Achaia. That word example is from the Greek word tupos, and it means a pattern. It really has the idea of, if you've ever been out and you found like a large stone that's been buried in the dirt, and you take the time and the effort to pry that stone up out of the dirt, out of the mud, and then you look down in the hole that the stone came out of, and you study the dirt carefully. What does that dirt look like inside that hole that you just dug that stone out of? You can see every little crack and every little crevice and every little quality of what that stone looked like. You can see kind of imprinted into the dirt once you pull that stone out. So it made its mark, it made its imprint. That's this idea of example. You want to be an example for someone else to follow, for someone else to imitate. So in a disciple-making church, a New Testament disciple-making church, you, Lord willing, have someone connected to your life that you're following, that you're imitating, but then in time, you also have somebody in your life where you are being the example for them. And I think this should be true of every single believer in a New Testament church at some period in your life. What it means to be a disciple maker is you have somebody where you've connected your life to their life and you are being an example for them to follow. Right? And we say, right, it's our ones, right? That's a big thing here in the church. You should be following one, winning one, and then leading one. And that leading one comes right out of 1 Thessalonians 1 and verse 7, where you are being an example. And we say one. Now, I will say this. All of disciple making is a work of God. It is underpinned by the Spirit of God. It is not you. It is God doing this through you. And oftentimes, if you are just obedient, God will do through you beyond and above and beyond what you could even imagine or think. Right? Do you remember the church in Thessalonica? Do you remember kind of some of the characteristics that were true of that church? It was a very young church, made up mostly of women. They were poor. They were experiencing extreme opposition. And, in our modern westernized culture, if those things are true about a church, we probably think, well, that church isn't going to make it very long. But yet they were obedient to the word, they were obedient to being disciplers, and God blessed their simple obedience. And look what the end of verse 7 says. You became example to all the believers in Macedonia and Achaia. God will do through your simple, faithful obedience way more than you ever would have imagined. If you are just faithful and do the part that God has called you to do, he's going to bless that. Anybody know how big Macedonia and Achaia are? Land mass-wise, it's hard for us to think land mass-wise. Somewhere, as I was searching this, I was able to take kind of ancient Macedonia and Achaia and overlay it on the map of the Midwest. Macedonia and Achaia is all of Wisconsin, all of Minnesota, most of Michigan, parts of Illinois, parts of Iowa. That's Macedonia and Achaia. Pretty big, right? And this tiny little church that was brand new, that had no money, suffering intense persecution, God broke the bread of their obedience and reached all the believers in that incredible area. And so God can do the same thing here. God can reach Economowoc and Dousman and Watertown and Ixonia and Johnson Creek. God could easily reach these areas through our little tiny church by just being faithful and obedient to the things Jesus has called us to do. And everyone kind of rolling up their sleeves and getting involved, doing the work of ministry. We go from one spiritual, professional, paid professional behind the pulpit doing the work of ministry to the entire body doing the work of ministry. That's the difference. That's how we're going to reach our Jerusalem, our Judea, Samaria, and that's how the gospel is going to go out from us even to the ends of the earth, is if we're obedient to that. So let's be faithful. Let's keep going. Right now, there's these beginnings of these discipling relationships. This is the start of us being able to have this kind of an impact for the gospel. So keep that in mind. Pray, remember, when you start, pray for your ones, that God will let you win one to Christ, so that you can, in time, be an example to that one. And pray that God would work in you and through you above all that you can even begin to imagine or think. So we'll let you be dismissed to break up into your discipling groups. If you need help, you don't have your discipler here this morning, and you need help finding a group, come find me, and I'll make sure that you get connected with somebody. Otherwise, just jump into a group that you see formed, and we'll give you the rest of the time to disciple. You're dismissed.